All right, we are live.
All right. Welcome, everybody. This is Casey Church from Granville, Michigan tonight. I'm on the land of the Anishinaabe people here in Lower Michigan. It's the people made up of the Potawatomi, the Ottawa, and the Ojibwe people. Together, they call themselves the Anishinaabe. I'm part of the Potawatomi group here, and we're up here in Michigan getting my son settled into college. And I'm going to be, after this, I'm going to get myself settled into therapy. So, so we're getting him settled in there. So we're handling it pretty well. Tonight, we had a special night. We had met with the Native Student Association group there at the Grand Valley College at a teaching lodge that they just built this summer and had a great time out there. And one reason that I was there tonight is I was given the floor because 27 years ago, I started this NASA group. And it's still going today, doing very good things. And I just wanted to, share that with you. That's where I am tonight. And Leah and Brian are in the land of the Pueblo people. And I believe I got to turn it over to Andrew, who is going to do our land acknowledgement. And are you going to do the opening prayer as well? I'm going to lay that in your lap there too, Andrew.
So, yes. Okay. Thank you, Casey. So yeah, we're all coming from different places. I live here on the ancestral homeland of the Tualatin or Atfalati people. They're a northern Kalapuya people. They were removed 1856 and became part of the Grand Ronde Reservation, which is about 60 miles southwest of here. And for our Four Directions prayer, attributed to Chief Seattle, Great Spirit of Light, come to me out of the east with the power of the rising sun. Let there be light in my words. Let there be light on my path that I walk. Let me remember always that you give the gift of a new day, and never let me be burdened with sorrow by not starting over again. Great Spirit of creation, send me the warm and soothing winds of the south. Comfort me and caress me when I am tired and cold. Unfold me like the gentle breezes that unfold the leaves on the trees. As you give to all the earth your warm moving wind, give to me so that I may grow close to you in warmth. Great life-giving Spirit, I face the west, the direction of sundown. Let me remember every day that the moment will come when my sun will go down. Never let me forget that I must fade into you. Give me a beautiful color. Give me a great sky for setting, so that when it is my time to meet you, I can come with glory. Great Spirit of love, come to me with the power of the north. Make me courageous when the cold wind falls upon me. Give me strength and endurance for everything that is harsh, everything that hurts, everything that makes me squint. Let me move through life ready to take what comes from the north. Man did not create the web of life, but he is but a strand in it. Whatever man does to the web, he does to himself.
Awesome. Thank you, Andrew. Very good. It's good to open up with those kind of words. Remind us of our Creator, remind us of who we are, the places we come from. I wanted my turn to come up with creation insights here today. And like I said, I'm up here in my homeland of my people. And while I've been up here, just creation has just been speaking to me from all sides. So I don't know which one to pick. This morning, as I opened the sliding doors, and there's a big pond out to the south of us here. And as I looked out there, a big sandhill crane came swooping in, landed on a rock that set in the middle of the lake, and it's real cool because it must be a little stump that's set out there. And he knew right where it was. And so when he went in there and he sat on it, it looked like he was sitting right on water, and, like without falling through like Jesus did, and the crane just kind of sat there, kind of knew right where that little stump was, and it was just really cool. And the crane is one of my clans. It's the clan on my dad's side here. My dad is Odawa and half, actually, I want to say he's half British and half, trying to think, I'm losing a blank there. It's called Nottawassippi Huron Band of Potawatomi. That's kind of a long name. But so the Crane clan has a lot of characteristics of it. And one of them is that it's part leadership and also has the gift of oratory. And so when I have that gift in me, I feel sometimes that, yes, I don't think I have the greatest gift of oratory, but I have the ability to stand up and speak when it's time to speak. And sometimes I lay back and I don't say anything until I feel that it's time to say something. Sometimes even though I'll wait for a long time and I'll wait till somebody say, Case, do you have anything to add? And then I'll share. But a lot of times I'm willing and ready to share messages, willing and ready to share insights that I've learned over 65 years of life now. So I at this meeting that I had this evening with the NASA group, as we were sitting there as well, I could hear just the surroundings of my upbringing, the birds that make a special noise and their tweeting that they make. All of that just kind of brought me back to who I was growing up in this land, because you always see these little memes and pictures that people share. It's like this generation's growing up with so much technology and phones and computers and that. And then our generation, I grew up playing outside until, the yard lights came on. And it was a whole different lifestyle. But as I look back and I see the crane, it took me back to my roots here in this land. And I'm very blessed to be a part of this land and being a part of the school that my son is going to. And he, dropping him off there and seeing him starting to gel with his team little by little. He's one of the fastest runners. I think he's holding back some because he's really fast, but he doesn't want to, he can hang with the top runners, but he's holding back, I think in a good way, so that he can gain more friends and not show off his talent too much. But I believe that he's going to do well. And he has the teachings of Laura and I to take with him. And that's what we have been able to do, sharing our culture with him, sharing our life and our values. And that's the legacy that we leave. So with that, I want to turn it over to the Grovers now. We're going to have a song for us. They're there in Albuquerque, and I am 1,500 miles away up here. And by virtual, we are together on the same screen. Glad you guys are there.
Yeah, thank you, Casey. And a shout out to Kisa, even though your screen's not on. I'm glad you're here. All right, so we're gonna sing a couple songs. Screens. We're gonna do the honor song by Jonathan Miracle, and then we're gonna do our lift you up round dance second. Let me get to the Jonathan Miracle song first. Yeah, so this is Jonathan Miracle song, and then the lift you up round dance is one that there's a round dance that I often heard at water protector actions, and so we adopted that with some lyrics from the Old Testament and from some Jesus movement era songs from like the early 70s. So, but anyway, here we go. Please sing, dance, drum, whatever at home. We want this to be stuff where everybody's involved. This isn't a performance. This is a community sing. So we want everybody involved.
Yahweh, 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 Yahweh,
right, guys, very good. Very good. We're going to turn it over now with Leah is going to do our announcements and our offering time.
All right. Well, if you're interested in donating financially to the work of Good Medicine Way, you can go to the top of our Facebook group, and there is an emblem that will let you click through to PayPal to donate that way. And if you are interested in other ways, just message me in the chat, and we'll get you set up. And as far as one announcement I just realized this week, this is actually the 5-year anniversary this week of Good Medicine Way starting. Yeah, we started right in the middle of August in 2017 over at the Christ United Methodist Church Fellowship Hall 5 years ago. And so we're a few miles away from that now. And many more people are able to hook in every week because of Zoom, because of a crazy old pandemic. But wow, really thankful for that. But then another announcement is our weekly women's circle every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. And if you go to the top of our Good Medicine Way Facebook group on the events, you just click on that, and there's that week's women's circle. And we're going through the lost history of Christianity, which is really interesting sounding. My daughter recommended it to me. She said they go back to just very early Christianity, the first few hundred years, and how Christianity got into Asia, Africa, and the Middle East. And there's even possibilities. It looks like Christianity might have influenced Buddhism, because the monks up in all through Asia were the ones who would translate if you needed something translated. So that was one of the interesting things about it. But yeah, looking forward to that book. So there it is. Yes, Diane, I believe, is holding it up. The Lost History of Christianity. All the ladies are welcome to join us Wednesday nights at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. Any other announcements?
Yes, I think we should announce also that the shirt that you have on.
Yeah. Where's the camera?
You're right there. Yes, you're fine.
Yeah, check it out. Good Medicine Way. It's on black now, and we also have these shirts, same design but turquoise back. So again, you can message me in the chat if you want me to ship you one of those. Let me know your size and your address.
Yes. Yeah. Speaking of t-shirts, I wanted to flaunt this one here. TVSU alumni.
Korean Valley.
Yeah, we went there. I was talking about how I started that NASA organization some 27 years ago.
Are you saying NASA, like the space thing?
Native
NASA?
American Student Association. NASA.
All right.
Yeah, we're already in outer space already. Announcement, prayers for us, Laura and I. We're going to be here another week here, and then we're leaving from here to go to Calgary. We're going to be up there to celebrating Culture Camp up there at the Pine Lake Camp in Alberta, Canada. We're going to be doing that at the end of this month, and it's always a good time. Jonathan's going to be there as well. We host a powwow. Laura and I are going to be hosting a teaching lodge as well there, and I'll be singing with Jonathan there as well. We're going to be setting up as a vendor this year and selling our wares up there, giving out our Bibles as well. We brought as many as we could carry with us, so I've been giving them out here and there. This coming weekend, 2 weeks, September 3 and 4, Laura and I are going to be at a powwow here in this area at the Labor Day powwow at my tribe's powwow in Dowagiac, Michigan. And we're going to set up as vendors, and we're going to have the Bibles there as well. Plus, I brought a banner so we can share about Good Medicine Way. And what a lot of times when we set up as vendors, it's an excuse for us to have a place to sit down and do a lot of visiting. We don't really care if we sell a whole lot, but we able to give the Bibles away, and we can visit with people that we've known for many, many years here. But that's what we got going here. Any other announcements as well? Anybody? Jibajikwe, are you going to be up there at camp? give me a thumbs up if you are. Yeah.
Unfortunately, that is my 50th birthday. And so my daughter and I are going to be backpacking up in the mountains just
Oh.
south of Calgary. So unfortunately, I'm going to miss you and miss the weekend.
Yeah, we'll be thinking of you. I just did a backpacking with my son. We went up to the top of the Sandia Mountains. It was from 5,000 feet to 10,000 feet climb. And I did really well until I got up to about 8,500, and then the air was too thin. I started losing it. But good luck on that, and enjoy your time, and happy birthday too. So, all right, let's go into let's go in with Heather. Heather is going to be reading our Creator's Word for us tonight.
Thank you, Casey. Yeah, and today's verse comes from John 16, 20 to 22, and that's on page 200 if you have the First Nations Bible. And so, and this is where it starts. I speak from my heart. Your ears will be many. Your tears will be many, and your hearts will fall to the ground because of what will happen to me. But the world around you will have glad hearts. All of you will be filled with sorrow, but your sorrow will turn into dancing. When a woman is giving birth, she has sorrow, for her time of pain has come. But when she gives birth to her child, she forgets her pain, for a new human being has been born into the world. It will be the same for you. You will have sorrow for now, but when I see you again, you will dance for joy, and no one will be able to take your joy from you. That's Creator's Word, John 16, 20 to 22.
Awesome. Thank you, Heather.
Thank you.
You know, I guess I just got to say this. as I was seeing the topic that we have today, and then the verse that she just read, is that I was able to be with my wife on all 5 of our deliveries of our children. And I think it's something that guys need to be a part of. I think it brings us closer to our children when our hands are one of the first hands to be touched when they enter the world. And I was able to do that with each of our kids, that when as soon as they were born, they were in my hands. And then I was able to give the baby to Laura, and then she was able to hold. So that's a blessing. So Andrew, you're going to be introducing our speaker tonight. So turn it over to you.
Thanks, Casey. Okay, so our speaker for tonight is Meryl Smith. Meryl is a citizen of the Cherokee Nation from the Wild Potato Clan. She is Algonquin on her father's side, with some German and Irish flavorings thrown in. Together with Cherokee friends, she helped to create a vibrant local satellite community of Cherokees in Portland, Oregon. She and her husband, Dr. Tim Smith, attend an inner city interracial church. They have 4 adult children, 2 boys, 2 girls, 2 granddaughters, and 1 cat to rule them all. She is a certified licensed midwife, specializing in trauma-sensitive care. She writes professional materials and teaches in several educational settings. 15 years ago, she and her husband established Worship Without Borders to equip worship teams and congregations internationally in culturally relevant spiritual expression. Meryl has a degree in theology, and she recently completed a Master's of Arts in Intercultural Studies through NAITS. Congratulations. When she's not at home catching babies, she can be found somewhere in the world among a group of worshipers with her flute in hand, expressing love for Creator. And tonight, in her Birthing as Healing ceremony presentation, Meryl will examine what Scripture has to say about birth as a healing rite of passage. We'll explore the impacts that a colonized birth industry can have on families and cultures that are already coping with pre-existing trauma. Finally, we'll discuss the hope that Scripture and traditional practice provide for birth to become a transformative event, offering healing to participants families, and ultimately whole communities. Reclaiming birth as a sacred ceremony is a vital step towards restoring identity and wholeness in Indigenous communities. Take it away, Meryl.
Thank you, Andrew. It was nice to be introduced by you. Let's see. Casey, I wanted to thank you also for sharing what you did, because so often men are thinking, what does this topic have to do with me? And it's actually really, really vital for men and for whole families and whole communities. So let me see if I can get my screen up. I got to try to remember how I did this before. I'm not finding the same. Let me go down here. Let's go here. There we go. Share. I gotta close that. And then I need to be on this over here. Sorry, I looked something else up, and so I'm having some difficulty closing everything else down so I can get what I need.
I think our computers, they need to be voice activated. So I can just say, share my screen.
Exactly.
Yeah, all this trying to find the right button is for the bird sometimes.
I opened something else up, and so I had to get all that closed down before I could bring up my screen. So here's this, and then we'll go from the beginning. Got it? Did that work? Do you have my screen?
Yes.
Yay! Okay, I'm going to be speaking to you from the same lands that Andrew was speaking from, the lands of the Kalapuya and the Atfalati, who are now incorporated in the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde. I just want to make a point to say that in some cultures, birth is considered exclusively the domain of women, and the men are not involved. So out of respect, I just want to inform everyone that there will be some images that are involving labor and birth and afterbirth. All of the images have been carefully selected for modesty, but if any attendee wishes, they can darken their screen and just listen to the presentation. The presentation has been rewritten since it was first presented 2 years ago at the NATE Symposium. And I thought I would have time after doing prenatals this morning to run home and quickly redo all of the PowerPoint. I didn't quite get that all done. So imagine we're on a journey together, we're on a trail, and it's getting near dark. And if I stumble over a few stones on the path, don't worry, we're still heading the right direction, and bear with me if the pictures don't always quite match with where I'm at, or if I sort of lose my step off the trail for a moment to fix things. Okay, this will be red. The journey of a birth keeper is similar to the weaving of a double-walled basket. Each new strand must be interwoven with the story of someone who invites us into their sacred moment of giving birth. They are our most profound teachers. The healing power of ceremonial birth cannot be conveyed simply by quoting studies. Research, however important it may be, will not call forth change unless it's woven with the transformative stories of real people. These stories reverberate with our frailty and consecration, lament and exaltation. We must begin there. My mama knew that her grandma had a gift, a second sense. As mama tells it, grandma would typically make an announcement when she sensed a baby was coming, and then she would carefully gather her herbs and a few supplies just before the inevitable knock sounded on the door. Grandma walked on 3 years before I received my own call to midwifery. I lament the loss of her stories and those of her teacher, Miss Ellie, who passed precious Cherokee traditions, birthing songs, and the skill of her hands to my great grandmother. Now it is birth that connects us. I feel both of these women stirring in my bones as I spend my own late night hours reassuring an exhausted mother or checking a fetal heart tone. They are with me in that moment of reverence when my hands touch a baby for the first time as it emerges into this world, and I send up prayers, a touch and a prayer that will be sealed forever in that child's unconscious memory. I honor these women, and my own journey has been interwoven with the stories of all the remarkable women and all the remarkable mothers who have shared with me their sacred moment of giving birth. They have been my most profound teachers. I realize I cannot adequately convey the importance of birth as healing ceremony by just quoting studies. Research won't cause change unless it's wrapped in these transformative stories. So here is one such story. It was her fourth birth. I quietly monitored her progress as she slipped into her language of origin and soon pushed her baby out. She didn't reach down for her baby as most women did, but continued to stare blankly at the wall. So I gently brought her son up and placed him into her arms. Bewilderment swept across her brow as she looked down into his round little face, indicating toward the baby with a slight pursing of her lips. She asked, "Qu'est-ce que c'est? What is this?" And the inquiry caught my breath. In that instant, I realized she was a survivor of childhood trauma, and I had missed the subtle signs. Dissociation was as natural to her as breathing. Later, she could not recall any memory of this birth. In fact, she could not recall any of her previous births and had simply related the fact of them. She had no awareness that it could be different. She had never experienced life any other way. When she appeared at the door of my office again, I was wiser. We explored ways that might help her to remember this upcoming birth, and we discussed place, people, and practice that she felt would help create a holy space for her baby to enter the world. We examined sensory paths, choosing the method she thought might help her to stay in her body and remain present. We never discussed any history of abuse. I have learned to trust that women innately know when they are ready for disclosure. This wasn't her time to tell. It was her time for rebirth. Both she and her baby would be born together. When she went into labor, her daughter smudged the birthing room, lit prayer candles, and then sweetly surrounded their mother with singing. They brought cold cloths for her forehead and herb teas for her to drink. Other than periodic checks of the baby's heartbeat, I remained in the background, allowing her and her children to find their own rhythm. As the baby began to descend, she once more lapped into her childhood language and soon retreated deep inside. Per her plan, I gently laid my hand upon her shoulder and invited her to move towards my touch. Following this sensation, she shifted her awareness into her arm until she was fully present there. And gradually, I moved towards her hand, using verbal guidance to carry her with me. Once she was fully present in her fingers, I guided her hand to where her baby was crowning. "Votre bébé est presque là." Your baby is almost here. A look of wonder spread over her face as her baby slid out of her body and into her waiting hands. She spontaneously lifted her newborn up to her chest and began to cry out with those universal words, "Oh, my baby, my baby." She remembered her baby's birth. The birth team remained silent as she explored her baby, put her to the breast, and delivered the afterbirth without assistance. At her one-day postpartum visit, we made an impression print of the placenta, preserving the branching pattern of the tree of life, and then she ceremonially buried her daughter's placenta in the land where she had been born, grounding them both into place in remembrance of what had just transpired. This experience was all she could talk about for weeks, digging deep memory pathways with each repetition. It was a ceremonial retelling, rich with layers of meaning. 2 years later, we met again over a cup of tea, and she poured out what had transpired since that transformative birth. The event had emotionally connected her with all of her children and gave her courage to separate from an abusive partner. This renewed sense of connectedness to her people created intergenerational perspective, awakening a deep desire to pass cultural values on to her children. But the most profound change was spiritual. She had a vision shortly after the birth, a divine encounter with Creator. The full force of his love for her as his precious child became so pervasive that even her perception of colors changed. Hues that had once been muted and gray now took on such vibrancy that she tried to capture them in paintings and music. She became actively involved in her parish, and she was especially drawn towards working with traumatized children. Recently, she had fallen in love, marveling at her capacity to take that risk. For the first time, she was able to let in feelings of being beautiful, adored, and safe. All of this, and she never once disclosed her childhood trauma. She simply needed a trauma-sensitive path of her choosing, safe space for ceremony, and minimal interference during the life-changing rite of passage that is birth. Birth as sacrament. In the beginning, God created people and place. They are foundational to our sense of who we are. According to the biblical story, the garden place God prepared was free of abuse, famine, violence, spiritual coercion, historical trauma, or neglect. The scripture story doesn't provide us with any information about Eve's experience of pregnancy and birth, except for one poignant allusion. When the knowledge of evil entered their world, and they were compelled to leave the garden, God forewarned that Eve's toil would greatly increase with childbearing. Nowhere in this story does it state that Eve was cursed. It was a consequence. The Hebrew word for her toil is the same word as Adam's toil over the ground. Helen Wessel, a pioneer in Christian childbirth education, has cited both Rabbi Samuel Rahel Hirsch and Carol Myers, a professor of religion at Duke University, as rejecting any translation of this word as physical pain. Rather, the word implies that the ground out of which Eve must now grow a family and a community would be hard and full of thorns. From now on, her daughters would bear the repercussions of physical, emotional, sexual, and spiritual trauma. Birth and motherhood, designed to be one of life's most creative and potentially fulfilling experiences, had also become a sorrow. In Judaism, the prayers spoken to welcome a child into the world reflect this kind of suffering. In her book, Red Medicine, Patrice Gonzalez cites a Mesoamerican prayer for the newborn that equally sounds like a lament. It cautions the newborn, you have come into the world, a place of suffering, a place of affliction, and concludes, rest now, repose on this earth. May that which is near and close mold you, provide for you. Scripture provides abundant examples that the toil of birth can be divinely suffused with healing and hope. Even God cried like a travailing woman to release his people who were long held in Babylonian captivity. Now I will cry like a woman in labor. I will pant and gasp at once. It is a triumphant defiance of attempted genocide. We are still here. Jesus said, a woman when she is in labor has sorrow because her hour has come. But as soon as she's given birth to the child, she no longer remembers the anguish for the joy that a human being has been born into the world. There is rejoicing, but there's also transformation. The Reverend Margaret Hammond purports that the Old Testament is rich with allusion to birth as inherently transformative. The image of the mighty warrior and the laboring woman are purposefully portrayed in juxtaposition, creating a picture of the tremendous strength that emerges from the toil of birth. Isaiah uses these collocated images and then follows them with a declaration of transformative change. I will bring the blind by a way they did not know. I will lead them in paths they have not known. I will make darkness light before them and crooked places straight. These things will I do for them and not forsake them. Isaiah 42:16. This picture of hope extends to the newborn as well. The psalmist proclaims that it was God who called him as he gushed forth out of his mother's womb, and God taught him hope as he was nurtured at his mother's breast. Second, Isaiah makes this beautiful allegorical declaration. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you. When you walk through the fire, you will not be burned. It references amniotic fluid and a mother's sensation of the ring of fire through which a baby must pass. Immediately after this spiritual birth, God calls his sons and his daughters from the four cardinal directions in much the same way an indigenous midwife would during a traditional naming ceremony. Ezekiel chapter 16 captures the vivid storyline of an abandoned newborn cast by the roadside. The infant is covered with the blood of birth, and the umbilical cord and placenta are still attached. When Creator comes upon her, he prays healing over her and imbues value with the declaration, live. God personally takes on the ceremonial acts of cutting the cord, washing, and carefully rubbing her with salt. He finishes this loving attention by tenderly anointing her with oil and wrapping her in embroidered linen. After these administrations, she begins to grow in dignity, self-identity, and the ability to receive love. When we compare natural and spiritual birth, there are unmistakable parallels. Natural birth is celebrated. Gifts and balloons appear. Smoke is offered up. Spiritual birth is also celebrated. In fact, spiritual rebirth is so vitally remarkable that the very angels of heaven sing for joy. Both births reveal identity and place us in families. Both require a sacrifice of blood and suffering. Both end in rapturous joy. Both occur right where heaven touches the earth. This similarity is so notable that Jesus explains spiritual birth by referring to the natural process. You must be born again. And except a man be born of water and of the Spirit, he cannot enter into the kingdom of God. By patterning spiritual birth after natural birth, Jesus implies that natural birth is suffused with transformative power. Reverend Hammond points to Professor Lynn Rhodes' conviction that childbirth serves to unearth and to interpret women's religious experiences. Engaging birth as a transformative ceremony is vital to our sense of who we are to become, and to our place in this world. Without ceremony, life impacting experiences such as birth will become what Rabbi Harold Schulweis calls rightless passages, moments of significance that simply happen without notice or celebration. They link us to the past and commit us to a future. They serve as an opportunity to reinforce central beliefs and symbols. Unfortunately, the church has long thought of natural birth only in terms of a physical event best left to the medical professionals. Hammer laments that women who give birth will often remember the scenario and the details of the unfolding drama for years and even decades to come. Yet sadly, few will see or hear much in the church that directly addresses or lifts up this awe-inspiring, life-changing experience. The colonization of birth. Colonization is a process by which a central system of power dominates and exerts an extraction-based agenda over a land or a people. Colonizers are frequently unaware of the harm its own ethos perpetuates. Ethnology can be a vital help in uncovering cultural knowledge hidden within individuals and communities, and it can assist our understanding of the dynamics that systems of power often wield to repress or supplant this innate knowledge. Dr. Fiona Dykes, a professor of maternal and infant health, explores the application of critical ethnology to the experience of laboring and breastfeeding women, sharing poignant opinions from several ethnologists. Thomas exhorts that we must seek out assumptions that lead to oppression, inhibition, repression, and constraint upon individuals and communities. Doyle and Pennell highlight how health and healthcare practices need to be understood in relation to the activities of powerful groups within society and power relationships that they stem from. When summarizing the findings of Emily Martin, who pioneered early research into women's experiences of childbirth, Dykes says, with the institutionalization and hospitalization of birth, women in labor were increasingly seen within obstetrics as part of an industrial factory, and that was how they experienced labor and birth. For the institutionalized system, and indeed the woman, labor had become a production process with the woman as laborer, her uterus as machine, her baby as the product, and the obstetrician a factory supervisor or even owner. Dykes strengthens Martin's argument, noting that the laboring woman is metaphorically and experientially disconnected from her birth as it is managed and controlled by and within an institution. She references Singer's belief that our approach to medical care must not go beyond our institutional processes to also, our approach to medical care must go beyond our institutional processes to also add lifeways, systems of meaning, motivations for action, points of view, and daily experiences and emotions to the encompassing holism of the political economy of health approach. In short, healthcare systems that incorporate a holistic approach to care will generate true health and healing. To the indigenous North American, this concept evokes the image of a traditional medicine wheel, which teaches balance and healing for the whole person. The surrender to colonized birth is not healing. Don't ask the medical providers, most of whom are sincere in their efforts to help women and babies. Ask birthing women. Roughly 30% of Australian women who gave birth in the hospital reported that their experience was negative, compared to 3.5% of birth center births where more holistic approaches are used. More than a quarter of study participants expressed that their experience negatively impacted how they viewed themselves, and 34% said it had a negative impact on their relationship with their baby. When women feel traumatized during childbirth, they most frequently point to the loss of autonomy, unwanted medical procedures, as well as the lack of communication and emotional support. They describe feelings of powerlessness, loss of control, violation, and dehumanization. These feelings are often the product of systems, not childbirth. The groundbreaking work of Dr. Michelle Odon proposed that when women do not feel safe and protected during labor, the natural hormone responses required to give birth and enhance maternal-infant bonding are disrupted. Subsequent studies have confirmed that the neurohormonal event of birth is intricately tied to emotional and social influences. Emotional distress during labor can cause catecholamine levels to elevate too early, causing needed oxytocin and endorphin levels to plummet. Catecholamines are neurotransmitters that affect mood and attention, and they can interfere with event processing, memory function, and duplicate the same neurophysiological changes as post-traumatic stress. The fight, flight, or freeze response shuts labor down, often requiring medical intervention to get it started again. Animals will cease to labor when they feel threatened, and the same is true of humans. Each medical intervention has its own risks, setting off a cascade of subsequent interventions that may end with cesarean section. Relatively few women experience physiologic childbirth without major interventions. Worldwide, 1 out of 5 women are delivered surgically. South America's cesarean section rate is greater than 44%. It is imperative that we guard the birthing process so that the precious neurochemicals that help women to give birth and bond can unfold. Rising endorphins generate a burst of well-being after vigorous exercise, and their levels are dramatically reduced when epidural anesthesia is used. Oxytocin stimulates contractions, but most importantly, it serves as a love potion. Oxytocin is what engraves the baby upon its mother's heart, increasing 3 to 4-fold in labor to instill deep satisfaction and attachment. If production is disrupted, it can be catastrophic. This hormone is what allows one generation connection to the next, and this has far-reaching implications. Synthetic oxytocin cannot cross into the brain. We require naturally generated oxytocin to induce the euphoric, trance-like state that enhances bonding. Robert C. Fromke, a neuroscientist at New York University, warns that love is not the only action of oxytocin. It seems to act like a volume dial, which amplifies the brain activity of whatever someone is already experiencing. Robert Fromke warns that love is not, it seems, oh, I already read that. So the medical world offers wonderful expertise when medical complications arise, but it oftentimes fails at guarding these natural processes. We've been conditioned to accept routine interventions as normal and subsequently fail to recognize the fundamental ways that we have altered the unfolding of childbirth. The internal message a woman hears is that her body has once again betrayed her. She is connected to machines that limit her movement while strangers walk freely in and out of her birthing space. Her progress is measured against the clock, and her pain is measured on a numbered scale. Escape via medication is continually offered when compassionate support may be all she requires. The majority of labor is spent alone in bed, where side rails barricade her from her partner's touch. This atmosphere makes it increasingly difficult for her to engage with trance, tap into the pain diminishing effects of endorphins, or experience the empowerment that comes with accomplishment. Without these connections, she will need vigorous coaching to push her baby out into the space where the delivery bed drops away. It is a trust fall. It's difficult to calculate what we've lost. We've grown accustomed to the rituals of medical procedure, while the true nature and ceremony of birth has become a faded memory. Labor that is managed as opposed to protected is no longer ceremony-centric, it is system-centric. Newborn identity. The newborn has been making his slow rhythmic descent until the moment he abruptly bursts from the warm confines into bright lights and noise. And before he can take it all in, his umbilical connection to his former world may be abruptly cut, allowing no gradual transition between worlds. The beneficial practice of delayed cord cutting for up to a full minute is increasing, and this change is welcome. Although from an indigenous perspective, a minute is a relatively brief window for a spirit to cross over. Undisturbed time for mother and newborn to bond in the first golden hour is acknowledged, but not always practiced. 1 in 4 newborns will still spend time primarily with the hospital staff for routine care in the first hour after birth. Even when a newborn is fortunate to go straight into their mother's arms and remain there, there's often little ceremonial pause provided for both to breathe, rest, heal, and connect with each other. Staff is busy extracting the placenta, cleaning the room, and taking vitals. And this task-centric flurry intrudes upon one of life's most sacred moments, the sila of bonding, when cords of the heart first entwine. If this vital connecting thread is frayed, the baby can be set adrift. The first intense gaze between mother and child, which is meant to carry the message, I see you, I know who you are, can be blurred by medication or even interrupted outright for attendants to inspect, weigh, measure, and package the product of the industry. Only within the last 25 years has the experience of the baby been an important consideration, and then only rarely, notes Dr. Raymond Castellano, a pioneer in the field of prenatal and perinatal psychology. His research convinced him that in events during prenatal life, birth, and then the first hours after the birth will imprint the baby's body and psyche and profoundly impact the emerging person and how they will be later in life. We know that monkeys who are removed from their mothers, even for short periods of time after birth, become persistently depressed and socially withdrawn. From a baby's perspective, separation is life-threatening. A newborn will develop self-protective behaviors and build future relational patterns upon those reactions. In short, first experiences become the foundation for the layered development of the future personality. Klaus adds that without a secure base established in infancy, humans from childbirth through adult life may develop and cling to the belief that the world is unstable and that they cannot safely trust others. Castellano asks, how can we best support the unborn, birthing, and newborn baby to reach his or her full potential? He quotes Reader, who believes that leaving the mother baby undisturbed in the first 2 hours of life is our first imperative. The evidence points that healthy bonding and attachment during birth is crucial to affirming healthy parenting and family function and to supporting the growth of unique children who are capable of fully actualizing their potential and appreciating the gift of life. It supports the baby's individuation process of coming to know oneself as a unique being. An individuated person is then able to come into relationship with others in healthy, appropriately boundaried ways. Dr. Thomas Verney sums the matter with these words: birth plays a fundamental role in shaping the infrastructure of our brain, the bedrock of our unconscious, and the elements of our personality. Birth has a lasting impact on our psyches because it is inscribed in every cell of our bodies, wiring the brain for adaptation to stress and pain, to bonding and to love. Birth as ceremony. Go back to this picture. The Codex Borbonicus, written by Aztec priests around the time of the Spanish conquest of Mexico, shows the god Tlaxcotl birthing herself, a symbol of the balancing and regenerative principles of life. She wears a conical hat, and in her book, Red Medicine, Patricia Gonzalez says that the hat is intended to signify a ceremonial responsibility. In effect, this image conveys that birth is indeed a ceremony. In ceremony, we open our spirit to receive wisdom, healing benefits, and direction. We connect with the land, ourselves, and with our community and our Creator. When women are immersed in the ceremony of birth, they find the innate strength and wisdom that lies within. Our men grow stronger bonds of love. Our children transition between worlds to experience their first moments of self-awareness and acceptance. And out of this seedbed, the family can grow into a transformative force within our communities. The story of Corn Mother, sacrificing her life to bring life to her children, can be found in virtually every people group in the Americas. Her story reminds women that when they enter into childbirth, they are stepping into a ceremonial act of endurance, a nexus where one walks between life and death to give birth to the future. This is no less ceremonial than the endurance required during sweat lodge, stomp dance, or sun dance. Labor is a ceremony, and it cannot be departed until it is complete. Pregnancy provides us with 10 lunar cycles to prepare. Madrona Bordeaux, a midwife of Haudenosaunee Mohawk descent, serves Native women in New Mexico. She points to the Navajo Dene tradition of a blessing way as a beautiful example of preparatory ceremony with friends that brings in a blessing for the mother to carry into childbirth. The feet of a first-time mother are washed and dried with blue cornmeal. Her hair is unwound and brushed to release anything that may be holding baby in. An uncut strand of fresh wool is wrapped around the wrist of each participant as a ceremonial tie. In effect, her friends are weaving themselves into her life as she becomes a new mother. Weaving and spinning have always been an organizing principle of the Americas that's associated with birth and creation. These loving ministrations create a cocoon of security and support. I always ask each woman about her family and her people's stories, Bordeaux explains. Storytelling is so essential to Native life. The stories passed down from grandmothers and great aunties can help and guide women. I also ask each family how I can create space for them to perform their own ceremony. There are Native women who have no interest in bringing anything cultural into birth, and others who are deeply hungry for it. Birth is different when the industrial overlay is removed. The overarching theme of ceremonial birth is that time comes to a standstill. Barring medical necessity, the labor will unfold in a timeless space that honors each woman's own internal process. In early labor, she will often prepare by cleaning her environment, an instinctive limpia or purification ritual. The idea of strangers in her birth space would be a violation of her sacristy. She will gravitate to her places of nurture and solitude and eat and drink to keep her body nourished. She will pace and sway in a birth dance as her labor intensifies. Her vocalizations become musical, rhythmical, and low. She may go to water to soothe the intensity. Bordeaux observes, if pre-existing trauma doesn't surface in pregnancy, it might surface in labor. When this happens, we hold space for them to move it through their body and eventually move past it. In these moments, women need someone who will say, "You are safe. I'm not going to do anything you don't want me to do." I've witnessed many women who faced huge trauma processing during birth and came out the other side as powerful, transformed women. If she's walking outside, a laboring mother often clings to a tree branch. Mexican midwives will offer her a hammock, or she may reach for her partner's arms for support. Surrendering to gravity, she hangs suspended between heaven and earth. This orientation elicits images of the placental tree of life, extending branches upwards towards the heavens and sending roots down through the umbilicus towards the earth. Gonzalez notes that examples like these demonstrate how the human body naturally interacts with, impacts, and transmits energy with the natural world and constructs the sacred landscape and ceremonial ecology. As the baby draws closer, the mother will kneel or squat on the ground, her instinct seeking Mother Earth to call her baby downward. For centuries, women have squatted upon birthing bricks and mutates or grinding stones to remain firmly connected to the ground. As she pushes, the mother yields to a latent force in her body that she never knew existed. When her baby slides out onto the earth, she will not pick it up immediately. This is her child's first connection with sacred place, the land where ancestors have walked. Aboriginal Australians teach that long ago, the ancestors walked across the land, singing and creating. And as they sang, they deposited a trail of spirit children into the land who sleep until the moment a pregnant woman steps upon that place. And leaping through this connection, the spirit child slips into the womb, infusing her fetus with the song of that place. This is the very moment her baby is quickened and becomes alive. It is that place on earth where he most belongs, and his essence, his deepest self, is indistinguishable from that terrain. He will sing the song of that place his entire life, literally regenerating and recreating the land as he walks. And he will return to that place when it is time to die and return to his place in the earth. The power of earth and song is universal. Left uninterrupted, a new mother will reach out to caress her newborn. Speaking in soft melodic tones, mother and newborn will lock eyes in an intense moment of mutual discovery. The baby gradually transitions to the breathing world as the cord slowly ceases to pulse. When she does pick her baby up, it is held next to her heart and is soothed by the familiar drumbeat that surrounded it throughout womb existence. The umbilical cord is not cut. This can wait until after the placenta is born. The physical benefits to the newborn of delayed cord clamping and an intact pulsing cord are now well documented in medical literature, but the wisdom has always been there. Rather than being relegated to the background as an observer, ceremony creates space for a father to step into his new role. Bordeaux observes, Native men can carry historic trauma and layers of res life into birth as well. When the father has a critical role of preparing and supporting his partner, the trauma energy shifts. He assumes a layer of healing that is powerful, and he comes out connected as a father. Mike Carney of the Lakota Nation is trained as a doula in the Mwinsa program, a Native American holistic care center for pregnant birthing moms and their families in Minnesota. Carney assists and supports fathers. I help them move towards feeling more confident and less intimidated by birthing and being a father. The man may gather plant medicines for the pregnant mother and keep a fire going as the mother delivers her child. If we can bring our kids into this world with ceremony, I think they will have a good start. Carney also teaches Native fathers how to make cradle boards. When fathers pour their heart into creating a beautiful traditional art that will hold their baby, it connects father and child to their people. Carney explains, they say that historical trauma is in the DNA of Native peoples, but love is in there too. We need to focus on that and bring it to the surface. Bordeaux sees the healing power of ceremonial birth reaching beyond the birthing couple and touching the whole family. She recounts the story of a grandmother who had experienced 4 traumatic births of her own. When she came to her daughter's birth, she was very nervous. She watched this powerful ceremony unfold and afterwards said, I had no idea it could be this way. It brought her back to her own roots and transformed how she felt about life and about herself. Women already know birth is painful and that it changes our bodies, but the gifts have gotten lost because it's been industrialized all over the world. Even if there have been generations of horrible birth, we can return to our innate knowledge, which goes forward to future generations. If we have learned to honor the trauma histories in our body, then why can't we also honor that our bodies have historical knowledge about how we give birth? Each culture has its own ceremony surrounding the afterbirth. Bordeaux dries a small piece of the umbilical cord for the medicine bundle. Some people will burn the cord or cut it with obsidian. It may be severed over a cob of corn, which the parents will then ritually plant to honor the story of Corn Mother. Gonzalez cites Raphael Girard. Order is restored by burying the placenta and cord in a cornfield and shows an understanding of the regenerative principle. These rituals are more than mystical experiences. They have physical, physiological, and psychological implications for wellness and well-being. The Hebraic culture allocates up to 40 days of sanctifying time after giving birth. Worldwide, cultures identify a similar time frame for rest and reflection. In Mesoamerican culture, the postpartum period is consummated in a woman's sweat, followed by a ceremony to close the womb. The older women will wrap the mother's body tightly in the rebozo, a woven shawl, and then gently rock her back and forth as they sing to ease her pelvic joints back together. These ceremonial attentions will vary, but all honor the sacredness of the postpartum time and impart deep reassurance to the mother of belonging, love, and closure. Finally, birth keeping. Indigenous persons are acutely aware that we are more medically at risk than the dominant culture. Tribal governments work hard to access and improve desperately needed medical services for tribal citizens, and sometimes medical scarcity will compel tribes to develop a tolerance of mistreatment rather than insisting upon care that promotes community and spiritual healing. It is possible to improve access to medical care without sacrificing our dignity and our intrinsic capacity for healing. As we move towards reclaiming our own healing wisdom, childbirth should be in the foremost of our thoughts. How do we begin? Gathering story. In the United States, the traditional methods of delivery were outlawed by a 1942 regulation. Our generational line of storytelling was broken, losing the thread of ceremony. Mesoamerican women are now poring over the recorded codices for clues to recreate their ceremonies. The original peoples of the America reconnect to these symbols as acts of self-determination. Preserving our stories is time imperative. The intentional gathering of birth stories that are held by our elders is essential to restoring the ceremony surrounding childbirth. sharing with relatives. We can learn from tribal medical systems that are already working. Family Spirit is a home visitation program that promotes health and well-being for parents and children in over 100 tribal communities. In this evidence-based model, tribal communities themselves determine the cultural aspects of the service and integrate their understanding of health. The program connects clients to their traditional healers and elders to learn their cultural practices involving birth and childcare. Ojibwe Tribal Chairman Farron Jackson explains, the traditional practice of acknowledging the gift of a child is no longer carried out, but we are reviving it as a means to encourage the community to come together and create positive energy. Lisa Abramson of the Intertribal Council of Michigan says, the program has helped us provide services in a way that connects us to our culture and way of life. Post-traumatic growth. We can open paths in our medical systems for post-traumatic growth. Most medical providers lack training in trauma-informed and trauma-sensitive care. Tribes can request that medical personnel receive this training as a requirement of employment. Targeted training will help caregivers create medical safe zones that facilitate post-traumatic growth. Houses of faith. In the bustle of baby showers and meal trains, churches often forget to treat pregnancy and birth itself as a sacrament capable of imparting divine grace to its participants. I suspect this neglect is the result of centuries of male-centric theologies which long viewed women and the power to create with suspicion. It is time for us to pray public prayers for expectant mothers and fathers. We can consecrate female chaplains to prepare pregnancy-related liturgy and serve as spiritual midwives who guide women through this life transformation and serve as a source of solace and healing during the tragic event of a loss. Women are hungry for trauma-specific healing ceremony. The warrior sweat lodges are powerful places that reconnect veterans to themselves and to their communities, and birthing women need trauma healing ceremonies as well. And finally, beloved women, we can facilitate the training of Indigenous birth keepers. Certified nurse and certified professional midwives are trained healthcare professionals who are guardians of birth with fewer medical interventions. Traditional midwives preserve the community knowledge of traditional birth practices. Doulas educate and emotionally support women throughout the 9 months of pregnancy, childbirth, and postpartum. They answer questions, offer options, provide physical and emotional support in labor, help new mothers establish successful breastfeeding, and provide postpartum relief so a new mother can rest. Continuous doula support can dramatically reduce medical interventions, rates of cesarean section, and incidents of postpartum despair and depression. And our benediction, our future will be woven from the thread of our past and from each new story that is now unfolding. By guarding the sanctity of childbirth and receiving it as transformative ceremony, healing will be carried forward, one story, one child, one family, one generation at a time, until our collective stories have woven us into a strong people. Nowoti, this is good medicine.
Oh,
Thank you. Hey, Meryl, unfortunately, we weren't actually seeing your slideshow.
Oh,
But-
really?
No, but your oration was so captivating that I think nobody to fix it. So I don't know. We see your control screen, but we don't.
Oh,
we,
interesting. Let me see if I can go back, and as we talk, I can run through the pictures. Just because
yeah,
it's
I
so
don't know
beautiful.
if you have some photos you especially want to highlight.
You
can-
could have absolutely stopped me, and we could have fixed that.
Yeah, no, it was. By the time I realized, like, oh, this isn't. She must have a screen that's going somewhere. But your oration was so captivating that I didn't want to interrupt it at that point.
Well, because it's a little long, there's something about the pictures that makes it not seem quite so laborious.
Uh,
That was good. I was definitely cheering in there at different points and like,
Very good, Meryl. This was excellent. I know Brian is going to be leading us through the Q&A time here, but I connected so many different points there that I guess I'm part male doula as well, because I teach men how to make the cradle board, and I do a class on how I was able to connect with my wife in childbirth and the baby, and teach them not to be afraid of it, but as a place to reconnect with the wife and with baby in a very, very significant way. So I'll leave it over to Brian to take it away, and I don't want to take up too much time, but I love this. Very good, Meryl. Thank you. Brian, take it away.
All right, yeah. So any questions or comments?
on YouTube or the chat. One question that comes to mind for Casey and Meryl, like, do you have, speaking of, like, I love the idea of there being, you know, liturgy or ceremony, like more churches, especially like native way churches like this one, to have ceremonies or liturgy to help the women through the different parts of like pregnancy, birth, or in the case of a miscarriage, absolutely that too. That's very important, I think, to walk through with the community of faith. Do you guys know of liturgies or ceremonies that exist or have been written or done or anything like that?
I do know that there are a few that Reverend Hammond pointed out, but not many. No, they need to be, we need to be writing them. So if you want to research more of that, the name of her book is Birth. It's the Reverend Margaret Hammond. And it's the only birth book that I could find that addressed in any depth the matters of birthing. And she does discuss the lack of liturgy.
For myself, Laura and I have worked with several women, and I also work with two other doulas in Michigan as well when I do my cradle board making programs and teaching the use of the cradle board, and then the extent that I get involved in the childbirth as well. And so there, and our place, our belief is that some things are too sacred to share in writing. That is a real colonized way of moving forward. So a lot of that is individual teaching that we do, rather than codifying every movement and everything that we do. Traditionally, Laura and I try to keep many of our teachings to a very personal level.
And that was a real difficulty in writing that, in terms of wanting to give a few examples of what ceremony might look like. I had to gravitate towards one that had moved somewhat into the general population, so that I was not communicating anything that was protected.
Were you able to use these everything that you wrote with Amy and Anna, your kids?
With my first, I had a hospital birth, and that's when I went, something's wrong here. We need to fix this. And that's part of what motivated me to become a midwife. Each birth, I began asserting myself more, but it wasn't until I had my fourth child at home that I was able to implement a really hands-off approach to the birth and involve my children more, and have, there was intent to have more ceremony, but I had him in 20 minutes. So there was no time to really do anything that I had planned during the actual labor. So, but I do have my granddaughter's placentas still in my freezer because my daughter wanted to save them to plant them when they have land that is their own, that they, you know, can walk on themselves and call their own. And so we're waiting for that moment. And Jabikwe, are you still here? Is she still here? If she's still here, I would love to have her share her recent experience.
Yes, she's here.
Yeah, I'm still here. Yeah, so I just before I answer that, Meryl, so I think when I heard your first presentation at Nate's and then realizing just even the framing of the pregnancy and the whole birth as ceremony, and like for myself, I think I had shared with you and some other folks too, of actually I had experienced trauma at the birth of my daughter, but never really, I guess, said it was trauma until actually after hearing your presentation. And so again, it's just that reminder, like for myself and the people that I'm working with, of reclaiming some of those traditions and how important. And I think even the term ceremony, I think people just either, I don't know if it's the heebie-jeebies that they get and where it's just, I think for traditionally, it was just the way we did things and not necessarily terming it as ceremony. It just what it was. That's what we do. And so, like for myself, I actually was really intentional when I found out I was pregnant, and so surrounding myself with other strong and healthy Indigenous women. And so for me, actually had hoped to have a home birth, and so I had 13 women present, and so they each had a role representing the 13 moons, and so there was, even throughout that pregnancy, of the teachings that people were providing me in preparation to become a mom. And so even that in itself, I guess you can term as being ceremony. But yeah, so I ended up keeping my daughter's placenta, and it traveled from Ontario across the country to Saskatchewan. And so it's been in grandma's freezer probably, I think, the last 10 years, trying to figure out, like, there was a reason and there was a purpose of why I was very advocated to have it, because at the time in Ontario, the hospitals wouldn't allow people to, like, allow women to take the placenta out of the hospital. It was one thing, like if I had a home birth with my midwife, like that was already a conversation that we had already talked about. And so that they were okay with it. But when I ended up having to go into the hospital, then the hospital, it just ended up becoming an issue. But anyway, so I ended up having it. It's been in my grandma's freezer. And so recently, I guess it would have been springtime, I ended up receiving teachings from a woman who talked about ceremony and about burying my daughter's placenta. And she hasn't started her time. And so Nina indicated now is the time, because she's still a child. She hasn't, moved into womanhood. And so to be able to do it, and so then it just, there was no reason not to do it. And so my daughter participated, I think it was like just only a couple of weeks ago. And so we both went out to my brother's acreage, went out onto the land, and then my daughter chose the tree. And so I started to dig the hole, but then she ended up doing a lot of it. And so it was just a good, I think, bonding for both of us. And so realizing that it was a part of me, but it was also life for her. And so we just, it was really special. Like it was, I wasn't sure what to expect when we did it. I also ended up having her belly button, so we kind of threw that in as well. But yeah, like it was beautiful, and it was yeah, I'm hoping that then when she has kids way down the road, that that'll be something that she'll be able to carry on and not think twice about, of the placenta and the belly button. But yeah, I'm so thankful that she's actually had a lot of those ceremonies, and starting life in a good way, like right from the beginning for herself, of, even though it was a very traumatic birth for her, but we had like a welcoming ceremony. We welcomed her into the powwow circle, and then her naming ceremony. And so now the next rite of passage for her is when she becomes a woman. And so I'm excited for her. She's not so thrilled, but I think later on she'll realize how important, the next ceremony will be for her. So
Thank you for sharing that.
Good. So,
I don't see any hands up. So yeah, just if somebody has a question or a comment, just go ahead and speak it out. And then if we get people going on top of each other, we'll try to get organized. But
Well, yeah, I mean, another comment I have, okay, no one grows out, but I've heard that some cultures, it's common for the women to cook and eat the placenta because it gives you a lot of the nourishment that just left your body. Have you ever heard of any cultures that do that, or?
It's actually, there are a couple of cultures that have done that, but it's actually not a very ubiquitous practice. It's a very, very rare practice. In most cultures, that would be a forbidden thing to do.
yeah, I can speak a little bit to that. Is that it's not a practice, and it's in some ways it's relating a little bit of humor to the expectant mother, who is very naive about what's going on, and the older women will say something like, after the child's born, you have to eat the placenta, and then the mother cringes, and then they all laugh, and just to ease the tension of childbirth. And but the Laura and I, all of life is ceremony. So you don't, it's like go in the morning and say, we're going to do a ceremony today. Laura and I, from all of life is ceremony. So when we prepared and decided that we were going to start having children, that was the beginning of a ceremony. And then taking care of her all through her term, and then making plans. There's different teachings that you don't have a shower, because it's very premature to say that there's going to be a baby and it's going to be alive and it's going to be healthy and well before it's even here. So there's those kind of teachings that showers happen after. With the men, I work with men a couple different times now with doulas, and now just recently helping men learn how to make cradle boards for their babies. Laura and I raised all 5 of ours in cradle boards until 9 months old. And that's how all of our children are raised that long. So because there are so many single moms, that Laura and I gift a cradle board to those women that don't have the male support in their families to do. So we gift them, and we give them we don't charge anything. It's tradition for us to teach the women about raising babies in cradle boards. But the men, it's fun. we teach them. It's very serious, but men can't be serious very often. So it's fun to be with them and teach them, especially when they cringe a little bit when we talk about, when my wife starts dilating and the baby's head crowns, and they just like go into they get all weird because they just can't imagine seeing that portion of the birth. And then with our children, they had such long hair that almost 2 inches of hair would be the first thing I see when the baby's here. I say, Laura, the baby's got a full head of hair. Yeah, so it's just that kind of thing. And then seeing the head, and then seeing the shoulder, and then seeing the fluid squirt out as things are happening. The men just kind of can't take that. And but it's a miracle that happens in front of you, a man. And I tell them that that's the closest that you can get to your child that you and your wife have brought into this world. That when you hold that baby in your hands, that energy that you have in your hands is the first thing that baby feels outside the womb. And then you're able to breathe. I breathe the breath onto the baby. That's one of the first smells that they sense when they come into the world. And then with our four daughters, 1 daughter, 2 daughters, 3 daughters, and 4 daughters, we have all these girls. And then when Bajo Joni came along, it's like, oh, there's something a little bit different with this one. And then I turned, I held the baby up and I go, Laura, look, like this. And then it's like, it's a boy. And she just, and as soon as we said it was a boy, Grandpa in the other room just shouted for joy. And that's how he got his name, Bajo Joni. His name means he brings us great joy. Yeah. So ceremony was all part of everything from the time that we started until, we're still having ceremony now. We just had my son's 3rd level of his coming of age ceremony for a man, from a child to a young boy into a manhood. So we had his third stage just before, a few weeks ago, and now he's on to college. But we take all of that very seriously, and even with the girls, we do the Potawatomi way of transitioning for the women, the girl to a woman, and then we also do the Navajo way of the Kenapa ceremony as well. So I've talked enough. I'll let somebody else share. But I love kids. I love raising our kids. I love the whole process of having 5 children, because we wanted 8 children. Yeah, but we got 5. But so we had to adopt a few. So we just told some of our Nate students, even people that we know, I says, you're our kid now, because we needed 3 more. So I'll leave it up to someone else for a comment and questions.
Yes, I have a comment. Can you guys hear me clearly?
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to say briefly that I just think the timing of your message is really interesting, which it was an interesting message. I enjoyed hearing about it, but I just think the timing of it is kind of interesting because according to the Hebrew calendar, we're in the month of Av, which is supposed to be a time of being in the womb of God, a time when God is actually birthing new life within us, potentially, if we participate in what he's trying to do inside of our hearts. So it's just interesting. Because I keep hearing it everywhere I go. This topic of birth and new life. Everywhere I go, I keep hearing it. So it's like I just feel like God's trying to speak to it, And I think you did briefly kind of touch on that a little bit, the spiritual significance of it, not just the natural, but it's all tied together. But some of the Bible verses you mentioned. So yeah, I just encourage people to dig into that, about what God is speaking right now in this moment, about what transformation he wants to bring, in our own lives, in our own hearts, what he wants to birth within us, you know. I just thought I'd share that.
Thank you.
Andrew.
Hey, Meryl, I just want to say for what you said. That was, it was really, really beautiful. I was enthralled and, and really dialed in. I guess I had never realized that the mother-child bonding, obviously it's sacred, but that lack of bonding was like can be an extra element of, you know, indigenous trauma, generational trauma. I don't know if anyone else, if that came up for anyone else, but that was really, I just kept going back to my relationship with my mom. I'm not going to share anything else with that, but what on that note, I wanted to ask, you talked about how like subsequent births can be healing for mothers that didn't connect with their previous kids, or even like that grandmother, right? Have you had any work where there has been maybe a bonding with the mother and the child that's occurred that hasn't been from like when she has the next child, like maybe, I don't know, in a way to almost restore that lack of bonding that happened during the pregnancy and the birth? And so I was just curious if you had seen that. And I know that, you know, being a midwife, it's, you know, you're so centered around pregnancy, but if you've ever followed up and seen, I don't know. And I don't know if my question makes sense, but that's just what I was curious and going for.
I'm not sure I completely understand the framing of your question, but I think that you're asking, have you ever seen people whose relationship with their child, if the birth was traumatic or there was a separation, find a way to reconnect later? Is that what you're asking? Yes, 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 and yes. I think that there is a reparative thing that creators put in our spirits, where we're drawn to connection, where we're constantly being moved towards reconnecting. And sometimes reconnecting isn't good for us if people are harmful to us. But I can even speak from my own life in that my very first birth, which was intended to be a natural birth, was medically interfered with the entire time, and I was literally put to sleep while I was saying no, and my son was delivered via forceps. And so when they brought him to me afterwards, I had missed that crucial hormonal interaction that God has built our bodies with physiologically to create that connection. And it felt like they were handing me a child that I did not know. But over what I did, I recognized that something had not taken place. And it became, even though I loved him, but it became particularly apparent to me when I had a subsequent birth and I was present for the birth, the difference. And so I intentionally spent a number of years really focusing on building that relational capacity with my son. And it came. It was rebuilt. It was restructured through experience after experience. It's like we had to lay this new foundation and then begin to build new layers upon, like blast the old rubble down and start building a new foundation. I think being conscious of that made it easier for me. I think when people aren't conscious of it and they just ride with what they're experiencing, it can have far-reaching and negative implications. But yes, I've seen that happen. You do, of course, have to have the party that you're trying to re-engage with healthy enough that re-engagement can be built in a healthy way, or at least guided by a third party like a counselor or a pastoral counseling or something, so that it can be rebuilt. But I do believe that we're geared, God has geared us for connection. He's geared us for community. He's geared us for family. And when it's safe, those things can be restored. When it's not safe, God sets us in new families.
But just to sort of add into that and to affirm what you just said. So I am adopted.
Mhm.
So, and I was adopted, and but I was 3 days old when I was adopted. So there's a whole lot of, I liked something Casey said, you know, everything is ceremony. And what my husband and I did with our two boys is not having that connection to, you know, oh, remember what it was like, you know, that we actually created ceremony for ourselves and found ways to, so we made up our own so that we had significance, because there was no heritage, there was no tradition for the hand-me-down. So you know, we made our own as a way to, you know, the anchoring of this primeval, you know, that your body knows what to do. And we were also fortunate, we had a really good Lamaze class, where the gal that taught the class, she was also a midwife. So we had a lot of conversations, you know, my husband and I, to build it, but without going into some serious intergenerational trauma. Yeah, it can be healed through childbirth and subsequent things. So I appreciated the presentation.
Thank you.
See, yeah, Lisa, go ahead.
Hi, thank you, Meryl, for your beautiful presentation. I just loved it. It brought up a lot of feelings for me, and I thought I would share because I think Andrew was asking, and maybe you can relate, and a few of the ones older than me can relate. When we go back in our minds to our grandparents and they had children, they had them at home. My grandmother had 18 children at home. The midwife were the older siblings, and they all made it, and I had this big family. And then we come into this generation and we monetize it and make everybody go to the hospital. They look at you like you're crazy if you don't go to the hospital. So my first birth was traumatic, and I remembered that feeling not safe with all these strangers running around with syringes and wires and all this stuff they were doing. But thank God I had my son, and that's the good part, is we had this strong bond because we went through that together. I was like a mama tiger when he came. That was my baby, and I wasn't gonna let anyone but my husband and I touch him. I felt very
Good for you.
yeah, like I held him to me. I was like, no one's taking my baby. And when that carried over into my daughter, the second birth, I was more protective of her and guarding that sacred space for the whole 9 months. And my husband sang a lot because it soothed me as we went through the birth process. So his voice, just his voice alone, was something wonderful and ceremonial in that birth. And I needed it, and I felt that it was being transmitted into our children. And we have a great family unit. So thank God for that. And thank God for people like you that bring that to our conscious awareness that not everything in the hospital has that sense of healing at that level. There's a whole nother healing realm that's spiritual that doesn't get addressed fully. So thank you.
The nice thing is that many hospitals and many birth centers, at least in our area, I can't speak for all hospitals, but they will make room for, so long as there's no risk involved, medical risk involved, they will make room for ceremony and,
That's great.
what people want to bring into the birth setting. It is much easier in a home setting or a licensed birth center setting, but it can be done in the hospital. And that's where strong dads come in who can, because a woman's focused on the work she's doing. And that's where they can create that ceremonial space.
I'll share one thing here. If you don't know your ceremonies, there's something in our DNA that tells us that there's something there that you need to reflect on and use your heart when you go into something that you don't understand. There's something about a kind of a DNA memory that will tell you this is what I need to do, and you don't need to follow some organization's way of doing it. You can create a ceremony that fits you, that is personal to you. But if you do know some ceremonial things that from your cultures, that then bring them in. But if you're lacking in that, go with your heart when you feel it's time to do something in a special way. Your heart will tell you what you need to do. And it's just that has helped me in ways, and that is what some of my teachers have told me too, is that, there are societies and there's ceremonies that are specific, but when you don't have those things and there's a new situation, go with your heart.
That's good, Casey. Thank you.
All right. Anybody else? Any last thought? Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Meryl. That was really powerful. As someone who works in the hospital setting and tries to be very conscious of kind of making the healing process less clinical, even though I don't work in a mom and baby environment, but just a lot of what you were sharing just really resonated with me about just the way of healing in general. And just, I thought it was interesting how you talked about how in America that how healthcare has become industry, and like even like the birthing process, and like the baby is the product that comes out at the end. I was like, oh yeah, that is really a tragic development and everything. So yeah, it's something I'm definitely going to mull over and think about how I can bring more ceremony and personal connection more intentionally into the healing process in the hospital, and try to make it less a factory and more a healing space.
If it's any consolation, it's something as a healthcare practitioner that I struggle with constantly is when, and so the way I kind of describe it when I'm preceptoring students is we have all of this equipment and all of these medicines and all of this wisdom about complications, and we put them in this basket, and then we turn around and we put the basket on the shelf, and then we just focus in on loving and nurturing and comforting and caring and observing, and then allow our experience and our wisdom to speak to us when it's time to turn around and take something from the basket, as opposed to laying everything in the basket out and start working with all your tools up front. And it's a wisdom walk. It takes time to know, when they don't teach. My mother's an RNPA, and she talks about when she went to school, and she says, the nurses that come out now, they know all the technical stuff, but they don't teach them as much about how to comfort, how to love, how to sit with someone's fear, and I think those are really critical pieces of healing. So it's lovely for me to hear you. I don't know what you do, but it's lovely for me to hear you talking that way. And we're all wrestling in that pull between our scientific selves and our heart selves.
This song. All right. Well then, speaking of ceremony as healing, so as we're all mulling over all this important information that has washed over us tonight, we're going to do our round dance song that we close with. So yeah, I would encourage you to use this song as a time of ceremony to allow the teaching that we've heard tonight to really soak in and bring life to some seeds that are deep within you. Yeah. Without further ado.
out now.
You medicine of Jesus is what heals us.
All right. And Preston. No, we can't hear you right now. You're
No, oh, I'm dead.
Wait a minute.
uh-oh.
Yeah, his phone died. Okay, he's pointing to me. He said, "No, you do it." Okay. Yeah, I can do an ending prayer for us. Dear Creator, thank you for your wisdom today. Thank you for all of the things, all of the knowledge that we think are lost, but they're not lost in you. You know and remember everything that your people have gone through, are going through, will go through. And it's part of your plan, part of your part of your responsibility. And you just ask us to come along with you. So I just thank you for Mary and her stories of how to give birth well in how to honor relationships, especially among parents and children. So I just pray that you continue to bless everyone here at Good Medicine Way and all the relationships, Lord, and all the relationships that we have within you. And I just pray for those that don't have a relationship with you, Lord, that they fall deeply in love with you because you deeply love them in a way that I can't explain. So I just pray that for everyone here, for their families, and for all of their relations, even for the places where they grew up and the things that they've experienced in their lives. So yeah, thank you for doing all of those great things. So I pray that in your Son's name, Creator sets free. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Thank you, Meryl.
All right. And we'll see you all next week. What do we got going on next week? Oh, and I would say, if you want, one thing we're going to be doing this coming Saturday, we're going to be doing a little, what we call a Bardic Circle, which is basically just like a sharing circle, song circle. So we're going to be doing it live here in Albuquerque in our space here, but then we're also going to have a virtual component too. So we're just using my birthday and my recent graduation with my master's as an excuse to get everybody together to share their stories and talents and songs and whatever. So
it's 3 to 5 p.m. Mountain Time.
Yeah.
And the link will be up on the
Yeah, and we'll cross post the link over to the Good Medicine Way page, so you guys will be able to find it there.
You can bring, any songs, poems, stories, anything like that. Artwork you've done that you want to talk about. We'll have everyone take a 3 to 5 minute turn, and we'll keep going around the circle. So if you want to talk about a true story you went through, or read a few minutes of a play you wrote, or whatever.
Yeah, anything is
the
good.
Arts.
Yeah, and if you just want to come and hang out and see all the interesting things that other people bring, like passing on your turn is totally fine, or asking somebody else to, sometimes someone will have read an opening chapter of some kind of story that they're working on. Someone will be like, I want to hear the next chapter. And so that kind of thing is fair game too. But anyway, so that'll be next Saturday, and then
the prayer night is next Monday.
Next Monday, prayer night. So so that's good. Those are important. Important for those times of fellowship and really communing. And we have so many great speakers here at Good Medicine Way. So it's good to have a time to just be in prayer and get some wisdom from the greatest source of wisdom, Creator, to spend time in prayer there. So thank you all for coming, and we'll see you all possibly Saturday and possibly next Monday.
Good night.
Night, everybody.
Night, night.
Good night.